afternoon. Welcome to class. We are going to begin with just a brief review of your homework. You watched review videos in your online textbook. You watched examples 1, 2, and 3. So you looked at solving two-step equations and combining like terms before you solved. And then you finished the problems in your notes on page 5. And the feedback you gave me in Canvas is that that went very well. There were no questions on that, so excellent. Then you completed problem set 4.3 in your Big Ideas Math online platform there. And that also went very well. You always have a solution set from me in Canvas that you can watch if you struggled with a problem. So that's always a resource for you there. All right. So today we're going to be moving on from equations to talk about inequalities. So you know what an equation is, right? We've been solving equations. And an equation is when two expressions are set equal to each other, right? So an expression or an equation compares two expressions and says that they're equal to each other. So we could have something like 2 plus 3 equals 5. We could have a variable. We could have x plus 3 equals 5, but we're comparing the two sides of the equal sign and saying that they are equal. So just like a balanced scale, the two sides of an equation are equal. And we use this balanced scale idea to learn how to solve for a variable in an equation, right? So we had 2 plus 3 on one side and 5 on the other. These are equal. The scale is balanced. Well, an inequality is similar, but in inequality, the two sides of the scale are not equal. An inequality is not balanced. We're comparing two expressions, and one side is greater than the other side or less than the other side. So when we have an inequality, we're comparing two expressions to each other, but we're not saying that they're equal. Right? So if you look at your notes on page 6, it asks you at the top, what is an inequality? And we're going to fill in our notes there that an inequality compares two expressions. Right? And we see these symbols, and you've seen these symbols before. You've seen a less than symbol, a greater than symbol, a less than or equal to symbol, and a greater than or equal to symbol. And we have some key phrases that we'll see when we're writing an inequality to know which of these symbols that we're going to use. Right? So you know that this first symbol is the less than sign. So if you see the words less than, you would use that less than sign. You might also see fewer than. You could also see smaller or under or below, right? So I could say 2 is less than 3, or 2 is fewer than 3. 2 is smaller than 3. 2 is below 3. We're comparing 2 and 3. They're not equal to each other, right? 2 is less than 3. Right. And we could do that with a variable as well. We could put x there, and we could say that x is less than 3. So we know that x has to be a number that's less than 3. Right? We could have the greater than symbol. If we see the greater than symbol, we might see the words greater than. We might see the words more than. We could see words like exceeds, above, or higher. Right? So we could say 3 is greater than 2. 3 is more than 2. 3 exceeds 2. Right? You know that when you have a line under the less than or greater than sign, that line tells us it's less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. So if we see this less than or equal to sign, we might just see those words, right? Less than or equal to. We might see at most. We might see not exceeding, right? So if x is less than or equal to 2, x is at most 2. X does not exceed 2, right? Our variable could be equal to 2, but it can't be more than 2. It's less than or equal to 2. And then if we see that greater than or equals to sign, we see some keywords like greater than or equal to. We might see no less than. We might see at a minimum. So if x is greater than or equal to 2, x can be 2 or any number larger than 2. So x is not less than 2. X is at a minimum 2. It can be 2 or any number greater. So we're going to practice writing some of these phrases here as an inequality. So we have a number q plus 5 is less than or equal to negative 7 and 9/10. So we have a word sentence here that we want to write as an inequality. Well, we see the key word here. Our key word is less than or equal to. So we know we're going to use the less than or equal to symbol, right? Right? What we're comparing is a number q plus 5 and negative 7 and 9/10. So we know a number q plus 5 is less than or equal to negative 7 and 9/10. So here's our inequality. Q plus 5 is less than or equal to negative 7 and 9/10. Right? In our next example, we have a number x is at least negative 10. Okay, so x has to be at least negative 10. So it can be larger than negative 10, right? But it has to be at least negative 10. So we'd have x is at least negative 10. For this key phrase, at least, we're going to use greater than or equal to, right? No less than, at least, at a minimum means at least, right? So x can be negative 10. It also can be any number greater than negative 10. Right? So make sure you have these key phrases filled in on page 6 of your notes, and make sure you have our word sentences written as inequalities here. And then we'll move on to our next section. Remember, if you have any questions, you can always raise your hand or type in the chat and stop me, and I'm happy to help you. All right, so turning to page 7, we want to write as an inequality this word sentence. Twice a number y is more than negative 5 halves. Right. So our key phrase here is more than. So we have twice a number y. So we'll write that 2y, twice a number y. It's more than, so we're going to use our greater than sign, negative 5 halves. So in this case, 2y can't be negative 5 halves. It's not greater than or equal to. It has to be more than. So we have 2y is greater than negative 5 halves. All All right. Now we want to check if some of these solutions are true. So we're going to move into looking at if a number makes an inequality true. So we're on page 7 of your notes still, and we are looking at the first problem here. Tell whether -2 is a solution of y minus 5 is greater than or equal to -6. So where we see y, we're going to substitute -2. So we'll say -2 minus 5 is greater than or equal to -6. Is this true? Well, -2 combined with -5 would be -7, right? We have -2, and then we're going -5 more, so we have -7. Is -7 greater than or equal to -6? Well, think about your number line, right? If you have trouble comparing negative numbers, right? You know, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, -6, -7. As numbers move to the left, they get smaller. So -7 is further to the left than -6. So -7 is smaller than -6. So this is not true. -7 is not greater than or equal to -6. So -2 cannot be a solution to this inequality, because when we put -2 into the inequality and solve, we get -7 is greater than or equal to -6, and that's not true. -7 is smaller than -6. It does not make this inequality true. All right. Let's look at the next one. Tell whether -2 is a solution of -5 and 5/10 y is less than 14. All right, so where we see y, we're going to substitute -2. So we'll have -5.5 or -5 and 5/10 times -2 is less than 14. Well, let's solve. What's -5.5 times -2? We know a negative times a negative gives us a positive, right? And 5.5 times 2, or double 5.5, we know that double 5.5 is 11, right? Is 11 less than 14? Well, yes, this is true. So that means that -2 is a solution to this inequality because it makes the inequality true. 11 is less than 14. Right. Then our last one here gives us 3 different inequalities, and it asks us to tell, is -5 a solution to each of the inequalities below? So for each of these inequalities where we see the variable x, p, and n, we're going to substitute -5 and see if it makes the equation true, or the inequality true. If it makes the inequality true, then it is a solution. If it doesn't make the inequality true, then it is not a solution. So what I want you to do now is try these on your own in your notes, right? And then in about 3 minutes or 5 minutes, we'll come together and check our answers, and I'll ask for volunteers to solve each of these and tell us if -5 is a solution to each of the inequalities below. So I'll give you a few minutes now, and I will have them solved on my paper, and you get them solved on your paper, and then we will compare answers.